host of the show. I discuss and review movies, new and old. You can watch the show on YouTube and Facebook under the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. You can listen to the show wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review the show on the platform that you listen to or watch the show on. You can email the show at bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. Please visit the podcast website at letmebendyourear.com. All the episodes are available there. On this episode, I'm going to discuss and review Godzilla Minus One. So this is an interesting episode for me. Godzilla, of course, has been around for decades. I think probably, I want to say, early 60s on to, of course, now. I have never really been a fan of Godzilla films. Not so much of a dislike or like. It's never something that's really interested me. I've seen scenes from Godzilla films. Obviously, there's iconic images of Godzilla attacking Tokyo. And even the kind of lore of Godzilla and kind of the deeper themes that Godzilla tries to discuss, specifically post-war Japan. I've heard the themes of them. Like I said, I've never really watched a Godzilla film from beginning to end. It's not really something I've ever gravitated towards. So you may wonder, well, why are you reviewing this particular film on this episode, which is a great question. So I remember late last year when Godzilla Minus One was released in theaters and had heard about some of the critical acclaim that it was receiving as one of the best Godzilla. So even at the time when it was out in theaters, I didn't, I saw the stories about it, but like I said, I really didn't pay attention to it. It wasn't a movie that I was intending to either go see in the theaters or even really think much about, to be honest with you. And then, as the new year started, that was pretty much all I heard about it. But in the last couple of weeks, it was announced that the movie was going to be released on Netflix. So it again popped back up in the news, and then it popped up, a lot of people posting about how much they loved the film and how it was one of the best Godzilla films they've ever seen. So I dug a little bit into it, and then as the release date came closer, I was reading some reviews, and the common theme I was seeing was the human story that this particular film told, and the emphasis on the human story over the Godzilla aspect of it. And it kind of piqued my attention a little bit. So I figured since it was going to be on Netflix, let me check it out. And I did watch it, and we'll be discussing it for this show. So Godzilla Minus One is a Japanese film. So of course, I know Toho Studio is the main studio that produced a ton of Godzilla films. And I know there's been other Godzillas. Of course, the ones I know are the recent ones, Godzilla versus Kong, which have been actually financially successful, obviously produced in the United States. And then the other one, of course, I know from the United States perspective is, I believe, the 1998 Godzilla, starring Matthew Broderick and directed by Independence Day director, and I'm forgetting his name, of course. I had it at the tip of my tongue. He directed Day After Tomorrow, The Patriot, and I'll have to look up his name. That's gonna drive me crazy. I had it right on the tip of my tongue. Basically the spectacle director. So Day After Tomorrow, not a great movie. I never saw the Godzilla, like I said, with Matthew Broderick. I did not see that at all. So those are really the ones I know about. So this particular one is Japanese. It's written, directed, and actually supervised the visual effects by the same person. Mr. Takashi Yamazaki is the writer-director of Godzilla 1. So as I do with movies like these, I usually try to name the actors, but it's tough here. I really don't want to butcher all these actors' names. I'm going to try to at least go with the character names so you can kind of know who I'm referencing in the review and discussion of the film. So this film takes place right at the end, close to the end of World War II in Japan. So you have a kamikaze pilot named Shikishima. He lands his Zero aircraft on a Japanese base on Odo Island. So the mechanic that's already on the island, there's a mechanic crew on the island. So, it's apparent that this island is used for planes that are damaged to be repaired and sent back into battle. So the lead mechanic is suspecting Shikishima of faking that he had issues with his plane to avoid battle. So there's a discussion early in the film. You know, Shikishima is a kamikaze pilot. So of course, if you know the kamikaze code in World War II, these fighters were specifically tasked with crashing their planes into ships to cause the maximum amount of damage, and obviously, leading to certain death of the kamikaze pilot. And of course, in this film, Shikishima basically takes the tact. The war is basically over. There's nothing they can do. There's no chance for them to win. So why would he end up wasting his life at this point in the war? So he stays at the island. That night, there is an attack by Godzilla. So the mechanic and his crew are trying to battle Godzilla. So the mechanic's name is Tachibana. He's ordering Shikishima to assist to get back into his plane to shoot Godzilla, and he does not end up doing it. And Godzilla does a ton of damage, killing a lot of the mechanics on the island. And the next day after the attack, you find out that it's Shikishima and Tachibana are actually the only survivors. And of course, Tachibana is enraged at Shikishima for what happened. So Shikishima ends up returning home and finds out that his parents were both killed in the bombing of Tokyo. So he's plagued with a lot of survivor's guilt, and as he's trying to put his life back together, he meets a woman, Noriko, who also had parents lost in the bombing, and Noriko has an orphan baby, Akiko. So they end up living together, and Shikishima ends up finding a job working on a minesweeper. So of course, post-war Tokyo, there's a lot of destruction. There's not a lot of ways to make money. So he takes this minesweeper job because it's paying a lot of money, even though it's super risky. So he's a crew member on this minesweeper, and the task is to dispose of mines that were placed in the water in World War II. But as the movie progresses, we end up finding out that they were actually assigned out there to slow the next attack of Godzilla. So what happens is, they are, with the tensions between the United States and Russia, they know of the attack of Godzilla, but there's really no help coming to Japan from either the United States or anything or anywhere else. So basically, Japan's on its own to try to deal with the situation with Godzilla. And to add on top of that, Japan has made a decision not to tell any of the residents about Godzilla. So, of course, they don't want to panic anybody. So, basically, they're doing this work in secret. Godzilla, of course, does show up. And they're able to actually inflict injury onto Godzilla by setting off a mine. But Godzilla basically regenerates, because what ends up happening is, due to a nuclear test that the United States was performing, it hits Godzilla, is affected by that, and of course it empowers him to regenerate. So Godzilla becomes something that's basically indestructible. So that's the essential setup of the film. And what was very surprising, and like I stated earlier, the human story is what the critics really have latched onto as far as their positive reviews. And I've got to say, for me, that's definitely the strength of this film. You care about the characters. You care about what they're going through. Shikishima is plagued with survivor's guilt. He's also plagued with the notion of having no honor and being a coward. For one, leaving and not performing his duties, and secondly, for not doing what he could to fight Godzilla when he attacks the island, and he doesn't do his part. So he's got that double whammy of kind of survivor's guilt and basically seeing himself as someone with no honor and no bravery. So that undercurrent in Shikishima permeates throughout the film, and he is racked with that guilt on both levels. So that's a very compelling story. The other crewmen of the minesweeper that he is assigned to, that he takes the job with, is fantastic as well. And actually, the standout in this one is a former Navy technician, or excuse me, not the Navy technician, the engineer, the naval weapons engineer. So that's Kenji Noda is the character name. So he's got kind of a floppy hairdo, or it's kind of a crazy hairdo. So you could tell he's kind of the intellectual, scientific one, and his character is fantastic. They're trying to figure out a way to battle Godzilla and finish him once and for all. So that's the thrust of the majority of the film. And regarding Godzilla, so if you're a fan of Godzilla action and mayhem, there was a couple of very outstanding set pieces when Godzilla attacks. So if you've seen any Godzilla film, you kind of know the standard. He attacks the city, wreaks havoc, destroys buildings, all the things that Godzilla does. Even if you haven't watched Godzilla, you've seen images, iconic images of Godzilla destroying the cities of Japan. And this is no exception here. But I have not seen Godzilla versus or times Kong. I think I saw the first Godzilla here that came out a few years before, and it's like you said, it's basically, I took it, my son saw it with me. It's they up the mayhem to me, try to maximize that as well. They don't really focus on the human story, and it's done for action, and like I said, those movies are very successful. In this movie, it's the opposite. They really focus on the human characters and give the human characters depth, and makes it very, very compelling. And again, that's the strength of Godzilla -1. These characters are all compelling, to Shakashima, to the woman that he's with, the orphan baby, and all of that works really, really well within the context of this Godzilla story. And the one thing I didn't know before I started watching the film, I guess the film, and I did not know this, won the Academy Award for visual effects. And after watching this film, it deserves it. The visual effects on this movie are fantastic. And from what I understand, this movie is not a high budgeted film, but the visual effects are spectacular. Godzilla looks spectacular. The attack sequences in the city, the destruction that Godzilla causes is all done just fantastic. There's a set piece in the middle of the film which is unbelievably fantastic. So the visual effects are something to behold, and definitely deserving of that Academy Award. So it was fantastic. And the other thing that I really loved, when you get into the third act of the film, where you have the showdown when they're trying to figure out what they're going to do to destroy Godzilla, is really, really strong, because when they come up with a plan, and again, this is where the human story comes into play very, very well, and the decision that's made to employ a certain tactic ends up being very, in my case, in watching the movie, very moving, how they decide that they're going to do it. And then, of course, you get to that point, and there's plenty of action, and you're excited to see what they're going to do and how they're going to execute the plan. And it's fantastic. Like I said, the action is fantastic. You really see the human cost. So I think in other Godzilla films, and like I said, I'm not an expert, not even remotely an expert. I think, but I'm sure in the multitudes of these films that have been made, it's basically a lot of, like I said, Godzilla destroying the city, people running, trying to get away, and the depth of character that is showcased is probably lacking. And I think the writer-director here was really looking to tell the human story, really more so than the Godzilla story. And I think some people that have had issues with the film, and I think it's more the Japanese critics, I think where they've picked at it, is they don't really see it enough of a Godzilla story. And I guess if that's what you're looking for, I can see where that criticism might be valid. For me, like I said, not coming into it, not really being a super fan of Godzilla, not really caring either way, it didn't bother me at all. It's still, Godzilla's in the movie, but it's really more of the best way to describe it for me is just it's almost like Jaws in a sense. That's probably a good comparison. So I think like the classic Spielberg film, this movie is like a version of Jaws. So you get the shark here, you get Godzilla, you get them in limited times throughout the film. There's long stretches of the film where you do not see Godzilla. And the strength of this movie is, at least in my case and me watching it, that doesn't matter. Just like you did, there was long stretches where you don't get the shark in Jaws. The acting, the tension that's built, the story that's told in between those set pieces is compelling and rises it above maybe a typical Godzilla film. So again, I think that's probably the best comparison I could give it, and comparing it to Jaws is a very good comparison in a great way. And like I said, the movie has plenty of action, but like I said, there's a lot of storytelling here in between the action that's very compelling. And again, these characters make it compelling, and trying to find a way to save their country. And again, the gravitas that setting this post World War II, right after the war, of course, the atomic bombs were dropped, the devastation that Japan was under at the time, and now they're facing this basically another attack of epic and destructive proportions, and they're still reeling from the outcome of the war, and now to have to deal with this as well. There's a couple of things that happen with the people in Japan in this film. Is one, they're devastated by the war, they're weary, but in that weariness and in that devastation, they find a pride to refuse to be wiped out by this creature. So again, that adds another layer of emotional depth to the film, where a film like this, for lack of a better term, a monster movie, you would not normally get such depth. So that's really the strength of Godzilla Minus One, is the human story is really focused on and really told in a compelling and interesting and exciting way all at the same time. So as you can see, I am a big fan of this film. I'm glad I decided to check it out. I'm glad I was listening to kind of the good word of mouth involving the film, and was really, really happy that I ended up watching it. So was there anything that I didn't like about the movie? I can't think of anything for me that was a negative, to be honest with you. The movie is about, I think it's 2 hours and 3 minutes. I didn't find any parts of it to be slow. Like I said, I was engaged with the characters throughout, engaged with the story, and really enjoyed this take on the Godzilla story that's been around again for, probably going on 60 years, 70 years at this point. So very, very pleased that I saw Godzilla Minus One. So I'm going to go ahead and give the film Godzilla Minus One 4 stars out of 5. So again, on that scale, that's a movie I would rewatch again. I may check it out again soon, again, since it's on Netflix, but I was very impressed with it and very happy that I saw it. If you are a Godzilla fan, I highly recommend you check it out. Again, you may have some of the same quibbles that hardcore Godzilla fans may have with it, that there's not enough Godzilla in it. And maybe, as I stated earlier, that's a valid criticism. It's not for me, because I didn't find that to be an issue at all. So I think coming into it not really being like I said, a Godzilla, not even fan or super fan, where I would look at that part of it to see, is there too much Godzilla? Is there enough Godzilla? That wasn't even an issue for me. And again, it really wasn't an issue for me because the story was so compelling that it basically negated that even being an issue for me, whether there's enough action or enough Godzilla in the movie. But again, I'm going to give Godzilla Minus One 4 stars out of 5. Again, you can check it out on Netflix now if you have it, and I would highly recommend you take a look. Like I said, it was a very entertaining yet deep movie, a deeper movie than you would expect for a Godzilla movie. Again, because that human story was really the focus. The effect of the trauma of the war and of Godzilla on the Japanese people is put front and center, and which makes, like I said, the movie more compelling than I think you would think it would be, since it's basically a Godzilla film and marketed as such. So again, I'm giving Godzilla Minus One 4 stars out of 5. So like I said, definitely check it out. Let me know what you think after you see it, and you can catch me on the socials to do that. And thank you for listening to the show. You can follow the podcast on X, Instagram, and YouTube. The handle is at Bend Your Ear Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the Facebook page. This show is a one-man operation. If you're watching the show on Facebook and YouTube and would like to support the podcast, you can click the QR code right up here on the left-hand corner, or you can go to the show's X page at Bend Your Ear Pod, and you can click on the tip jar there. This will help cover the cost of hosting this podcast. Again, thank you for listening.